Welcome, everybody. We still have a few people logging in and getting connected. So we'll just give them a minute or two and then we'll get underway. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining the Link Center for this shared learning group focused on the topic of supporting the whole person. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items while we get started today. The session is being recorded, and the recording and the transcript, along with the slide deck and any material we share, will be made available on our website. We welcome you to revisit the content yourself and to share it with others. Attendees cannot see the names of other attendees, and all attendees are muted. Please use the chat function in Zoom to communicate with other attendees and the host throughout the webinar. You can use the chat by clicking on chat at the bottom of your screen. Please do be aware that if you chat and make a comment in the chat, your name will appear. So if you want, you can change your display name by clicking on those three little dots next to your name and selecting rename. We will have representatives from the Link Center watching the chat and responding throughout the session today. And if you'd like to submit a comment or a question privately to the host and panelists, you can do that by clicking on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We have live captioning and ASL interpreters present today. We will be spotlighting the active speaker and the ASL interpreter throughout the webinar. If you click on View on your Zoom screen, you can change the way you see the panelists. And if you have any trouble with your view, please let us know in the Q&A, and we'll try to help you out. At this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Dr. Stacy Nonamaker, who is going to start today's presentation. Stacy, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Stephanie, and good afternoon, at least for me. And we're so glad to have you joining us today for our shared learning group, talking about supporting the whole person. The shared learning groups are hosted by the Link Center, funded by the Administration for Community Living. And if you want to find out more about the Link Center and what we're doing to better support people with intellectual developmental disabilities, brain injury, other cognitive limitations who also have mental health conditions or co-occurring conditions, go ahead and check our website out. It's new. So we're just getting things up there, but we really are looking for this to be a national hub, if you will, of places where we'll put happenings, resources, information around supporting people with co-occurring conditions. So check us out and come back often because we're constantly putting things up on our website. So just a quick note about the shared learning groups. This is the fourth one that we are doing from yesterday and today. Today, we are really focusing on people with lived experience as the audience. We've already talked to direct support professionals, clinical professionals, and families. And the content that we're sharing today really is tailored to people with lived experience, but it really is the same in all four of our presentations that we've done. We've put all of this information together as the Link Center partners. We are groups of people with lived experience, researchers, and also people who work on policy things and issues. As Stephanie said, we are recording the meeting today. We are transcribing it, so writing down everything that you hear today. The PowerPoint that you see, all of this will be available to you on our website, even though it says emailed to you in the slide. So we'll put the link in the chat where you can go after today if you want to have access or be able to get to the recording and the rest of the information. Please feel free to share far and wide. We're really happy for people to, even though they may not be able to join us, to still hear this information. So what are we going to do today? Well, let's start off by doing some introductions. So if you could take a moment in the chat and just say hello, maybe your name if you feel like that's okay. Who you are, maybe some associations or memberships that you have. We just really want to say hi and know who's joining us. As I mentioned today, we're going to be talking about supporting the whole person. People with co-occurring conditions have needs and need supports across many different systems. And so this concept of holistic supports and supporting every piece of somebody is really important to people with co-occurring conditions. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been thinking about as the Link Center around supporting the whole person. And then also towards the end of our time together today, we're going to pause and do a group exercise because we want to hear from you all what you're thinking about when it comes to supporting the whole person. So again, we're going to share what we're thinking about, what we're learning, and then we're going to share some resources. But really, the goal is for us to not just share all of this, but to have you share with us. That's the shared part of the shared learning group. So we just want to hear from you. Are there resources out there that make you think about supporting the whole person, or places that you go to that we could put on our website? Or are there places that you see barriers or gaps when you think about supporting the whole person or holistic support that we can think about? Is there something that we can do about that or take action? So that's really our goals for being together today. The next few slides were developed by people from the Link Center Steering Committee, and you'll hear from a few of our colleagues on the steering committee today. And they're really just to sort of set the stage for our time together. So this meeting will be talking about people's experiences and being supported. Some people have experienced trauma, and that makes it hard to recover and move forward. So we ask that you do take care of yourself and what's necessary for your own comfort and care. We remind you all, as we remind ourselves, that we should be gentle with ourselves and each other, because we're all in this together, right? We're all trying to come together for a common goal. And sometimes that's hard work. We celebrate that we are all individuals from different backgrounds. We celebrate that we have shared experiences to learn from. We know that we are each unique with our own experiences in the world. And finally, we listen and share with open minds and kindness. We do not judge or blame others for what they share. So let's get into it and let's talk about supporting the whole person. And let's start with hearing from you all in the chat. We know that feeling supported and having everything you need is different for everyone. What I may need may not be what you need. So we want to hear from you in the chat. What are the things that are important to you to feel like you have everything you need to feel physically, mentally, and emotionally well? So I'm going to stop talking for just a minute, and I would love if you would take a moment and put in the chat, what's important for you? Spending time outside, having time to myself and time with my family, good food, good sleep, meaningful work, another spending time with my family and meaningful work. Physical movement creates a balance for me, and mental health, open, safe communication with someone I trust, spending time reading my books and taking care of my cats, separating work from my social life. I live to enjoy life, and I will do everything I can to make sure that happens. Time for social activities. These are all so good, and keep them coming in. I see there's some more, and I love reading them as I'm talking here. And what I hope that you're seeing is we share some commonalities, right? I can certainly relate to some of the things that you all are saying, but there are also some differences that I'm seeing in what you all are putting in the chat. And I think that's really important to point out because what is important to us is so individualized, right? And that's at the core of whole person supports. So we asked two steering committee members, first Alicia, what is important to you for your physical, mental, and emotional well-being? So let's take a moment and just hear from Alicia.
Hi, my name is Alicia. I'm a member of the Link Center National Steering Committee for Mental Health and Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. I came here today to talk about how to support people from a holistic perspective by looking at the whole person and what allows them to thrive in everyday life. It's important to assess people's access to social determinants of health, especially around access to food that provides adequate nutrition and the barriers to obtain that nutrition. Often people with disabilities have increased risks with food insecurity. The average people don't really realize how it affects us, those of us with disabilities, and food controls like all of our essential functions. And if a person doesn't have adequate nutrition or the right supports for nutrition, it can cause like a decrease in executive functioning, communication challenges, poor health outcomes, and behavioral issues. It's important to recognize that these barriers affect everything from being able to purchase food or obtain supplemental nutrition supports to the preparation of food, even to being able to eat. And so people must examine these challenges around this issue when it comes to assessing the needs of people with disabilities. It's important to know that having unmet needs affect both physical and mental health, and the two interconnected also affect how people communicate and also how they respond to the services and supports given to them. And our direct support workforce crisis, that we've been in a direct support workforce crisis, and the whole direct support aspect has changed over the last few years, and we need to keep in mind some of the cultural differences and communication challenges that are present in the era of time. We need to be a cultural competent society, examining both provider and consumer relationships and working through language barriers and educational outcomes that challenge people, both people providing services and people receiving services. In my life, adequate nutrition has been key to helping me succeed. I feel better when I'm able to have my needs met around food, nutrition. It helps improve my health outcomes and quality of life. I have seen and experienced what my life has been like when my nutrition needs have been upheld and when they haven't been upheld. And I have a feeding disorder that requires some serious, careful structure around food. It requires me to have a meal plan and people to help assist me to prepare food. Because of my disability, I require a lot of hands-on assistance and people to prepare food. And so I've seen like what it's like with and without those supports. And when I'm not able to get adequate nutrition, I'm autistic and I have dysautonomia. And so when I'm not able to get this adequate nutrition, I have more aggressive meltdowns, more aggression. I have more challenges with my mental health. I also have more physical challenges like low blood pressure and even dysfunction of my autonomic nervous system. And so because I rely on people to support me to prepare food, there's challenges sometimes with being able to direct people. Sometimes it's due to like cultural issues. Someone might not know how to follow a recipe or something, and or I might not be able to direct them some barriers to my sports, and or just there's just general overall barriers with preparation of food. And sometimes too people might not know how to prepare a dish that I may need them to prepare it in a certain way. I think that that's definitely important. You know, I've been really challenged by directing my providers. I've actually thought about even visual tools for this. It's a big deal for me because not everybody learns and processes information the same way too. And that's super important to know too, is that, you know, just how you have to look at it from both the provider view and the consumer view too when when you're looking at how people are able to get their needs met, but also how, you know, how what type of needs are being met. But I really believe that, like, you know, we have to advocate for cultural competency and more plain language in the training of direct support professionals and in service plans, and also like too when special people have you know, more complex needs with like nutrition and everything. But people with disabilities, they must have access to adequate nutrition. And I believe that we have to make that part of the yearly assessment process too for services and supports. It's critical for helping people understand human behavior, decision making, and activities of daily living, because it helps see people as like the whole person, so they can the team can understand their needs. And my waiver covers nutrition and behavioral supports, and you know, it's been really important and everything. But despite having a nutrition plan in place, I've struggled a lot over the last few years to get my needs met because of the lack of assessments around nutrition specifically, and it's caused me to experience some challenges. And so it's really critical that providers and social workers, people that serve people with developmental disabilities, truly understand this nutrition piece, and because it also shows how a person directs their care and what supports need to be in place. So, you know, just because I like sometimes too, because I speak so well, you know, with my disability, people think that I can also like direct my providers very, you know, really well and everything. And so sometimes people don't see that they're, you know, well, some of us might be getting like one area, the difficulties, like the challenges around food and the connections and stuff. Like they may not see that with your typical assessment. And so it like, I think that having assessments around nutrition helps cut down on the stereotyping, and it really helps really look at the person from a whole body approach. And I believe that, you know, this should be available on all the different waivers, because it really assures people have their rights to make choices upheld as well. Thank you.
So great. And I think so much Alicia just said in all of that. And at the heart of it really was around understanding who she is and why something like nutrition is important to her. We also have Victoria, who tells us a little bit about what's important to them as well. So let's listen to Victoria.
Having someone that I can go to for anything I need is the most important thing that makes me feel supported. For me, that's my mom. Ever since I was little and I was in school, I had a hard time making friends. And my mom's helped me by setting up play dates, even though sometimes it didn't always feel like playing once my friends were there. I didn't really know at the time that I needed that kind of help, but I had someone who was helping me meet those needs I didn't even know I had. Throughout my education career, I always needed accommodations, but at the time I was a child, completely unable to self-advocate. So having someone there to help me, who knew me not just as a student, but what I was like at home, was very important. Because of my autism, I've also always had restricted eating patterns due to sensory issues, and that caused some health issues. My mom was really worried, so she tried to help me by not giving me the junk food I craved. But at the end of the day, that didn't work out as planned, and she was still supportive of me. She didn't shame me for not eating properly or make me feel bad about what I couldn't control. Later on, once I was a teenager and started having a lot of mental health issues, it was extremely important that my mother was supportive. In fact, I think the most terrifying moment of my life was once I turned 18 and I was essentially thrown to the wolves in the healthcare system. I was scared, I was alone, and I didn't have any support. The doctors wouldn't tell my parents anything because I was 18 and no longer a minor they were obligated to update my parents with. At the time, I had all the necessary medical help needed to support me, but that wasn't enough. It felt clinical and rigid because I knew these people weren't my friends, they were doctors. I needed warmth and comfort. I didn't want pills or drugs or therapy. I just wanted to be told that it's going to be okay, even if I wasn't sure it would. Sometimes there are things I can't uplift to with the therapist for a variety of reasons. The most common is the fear of hospitalization, but there's also times where I don't really need therapeutic support. I just need someone to hear me and listen. I've had therapists, wraparound, respite, and other services help me in school, but at the end of the day, they would come and go, and it wasn't always the same person day to day. When someone came from the agency, they just send whoever they have, and having to reintroduce yourself over and over again is frustrating. When you have someone, a parent, it helps to know that there's always going to be someone for you. The reality is, you can't rely on paid services. You need someone who cares about you and isn't just paid to support you. I'm lucky to have other family to support me as well. I have my grandparents, my cousins, my aunts, because my parents can't be there for me 100% and also need to take a break. My parents have sometimes gone on vacation, and when they do, my grandparents come to stay with me. My grandma makes my favorite foods, and even though it doesn't sound like much, it's a lot. Having my extended family around is a safety net, because if something were to happen to my parents, I wouldn't end up alone. To wrap it up, I can have programs help me buy food, pay for rent, get access to therapy, but I need someone supportive to help me make those things a reality so that I'm safe and cared for.
So thanks to Victoria and Alicia. And I think, like Alicia, Victoria is pointing out that a lot of things, but the one thing that really sticks out for me is really that idea of consistency of someone in their lives. And it doesn't just mean formal supports, right? It doesn't mean paid people. And for Victoria, that's their family. So really what we're hoping that you pick up here is at the heart of it all is that when we're thinking about whole person supports, it's person driven. It's what you want and what you need. And really thinking about what are your strengths and what are the skills that you need to live, work, and play where you want. And then sometimes beyond that, you may need some additional supports like clinical supports. So you may need some sort of treatment to help you self-manage, whether it's your mental health condition or other needs that you may have, or whether it's identifying that you need support from somebody, like whether it's a therapist or a counselor, that can give you those clinical supports and treatment. And it's important to understand that all this needs to happen in the space of healthy environments, having healthy relationships in your community, the way that you want to be in your community. And through it all, understanding that the foundation is ensuring that your social determinants of health and health-related social needs are met. And we'll talk about those in just a moment. Those SDOH and HRSN, we'll really dive into that. But I just want to say that I feel like sometimes when we look at this looks overwhelming and it feels like we have no control or we only have control over a piece of this. When really, if you think about it, it's important for people to understand what they want or need. It's important to work with people who can help us build the skills that we need, and help us understand what our strengths are. It's important to work with the people who can give us the clinical supports that we need, who can help us create the healthy environments, who can help us establish healthy relationships, and who can help us create the community that we want to live, work, and play in. And then also to really acknowledge that we can be working alongside others to help us get what our basic needs met, those social determinants of health and health-related social needs met. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Regina Rodriguez Cisneros, to talk a little bit more about those social determinants of health and health-related social needs and how important they are to building the foundation for whole person support.
Excuse me. Thank you so much, Stacy. Just wanted to mention that I am the Director of Equity Initiatives and System Innovations for NASTIS. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an Indigenous Latina female. I'm joining you today sitting in front of the Link Center back drop. I have my hair pulled back. I'm wearing red glasses and long red beaded earrings, and I have a floral shirt on. Next slide. Thank you so much. First, we want to define social determinants of health. And I do want to mention that this is the definition that's directly from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Social determinants of health are the conditions and environments where individuals are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. Health-related social needs refer to an individual's needs that might include affordable housing, healthy foods, or transportation. Next slide. I also wanted to mention that Healthy People 2030 have divided social determinants of health into 5 key domains. They're economic security, education access and quality, healthcare access and quality, neighborhood and built environment, social and community context. And we'll delve a little bit more in the next slide to what all of these concepts and terms mean. Let's start by talking about health-related social needs. Excuse me 1 second. I lost my slide. Health-related social needs are sometimes interchangeably used with social determinants of health, but it's important that we make the distinction of the 2 different concepts. Health-related social needs are social and economic needs that people have, that we all have. These needs can impact how well we stay healthy, how well we stay happy. Some examples of these types of needs are not having a stable place to live, the quality of the home that we live in, not having enough food or quality food to eat, having difficulty finding a job, having difficulty or the inability to go to school and attend school, maybe not feeling safe in the neighborhood that we live in, or not having a way to get around to our appointments, to our schools, to our jobs, to different community events that we have. Struggling with transportation is hard. Paying for things like electricity and water, not having the money to pay for those things causes a significant complication with our health. And also we struggle with things that we need to do, like prepare food, keep our home warm, keep our lights on. These are things that are important because they affect our health and our well-being. It's important to understand that social determinants of health, on the other hand, are conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age. And they are shaped by the way that we share money in our communities and the way that we share power and resources, opportunities for us to access the things that we need. And they're impacted by factors such as people making prejudgments about who we are not giving us the resources because of who we are and withholding those resources from us, being cruel to us and judging who we are and what our culture is about and what's important to us. These things are called institutional bias, discrimination, and racism, and these can affect our health and our well-being. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about culture. On the screen, we have what's called a culture wheel. It's a circle, and there are some different domains within our different sections within this circle, and each section represents a different component of a person's culture. So imagine your name in the center. Instead of it saying culture wheel, imagine your name. And then imagine all of these different divided pieces of the pie of this circle being different components of your culture. These different characteristics of who you are and of your culture help you to shape how you will behave, what your behaviors will be, how you think. They also help us to decide what language will we speak, and or will we be using verbal language If we're nonverbal, will we be using technology to help us communicate? These are part of our cultural norms for our individual self. And these customs and these beliefs and these characteristics of what makes up who we are also contributes to the way that we will present ourselves in society and the role that we contribute to in society and to different communities that we participate in. It also helps us to create some celebrations, some traditions, some opportunities to have common culture come together and share with one another. Culture, this type of culture could be passed on from generation to generation, from family member to family member. We learn these cultural norms, but it's also important to remember that in each organization, in each situation, we have what's called subculture. And a subculture, for example, could be a subculture group that you participate in, maybe your chess club, or it could be your Bible study group, or it could be your bowling league. In each of these different groups, we create cultural norms. For example, we high five after somebody scores, or we make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share space and take turns reading. We've developed cultural norms, and all of these experiences help us to create the values and the beliefs in us that help us decide who we feel most comfortable providing supports to us. Next slide, please. So what I'm talking about are different pieces of your identity. On the screen, I have a picture of some bubbles, some circles that have words in it. And inside the bubbles are words like appearance, race, gender identity, nationality, age, culture, just to name a few. Think about how you identify with all those words on the page, and think about how those identities, for example, if I am a person who, let's see, I'm a person who is of middle age, I might have some experiences related to my age that help me contribute to the way that I make decisions and the people that I have that I trust in my world to support me. Next slide. So what I'm hoping that we learn is that culture is important. It's important in person-centered practices. And person-centered practices means that we are the person in the center of the service who is offering our diverse perspective, offering our cultural norms, offering our values, and asking people around us to be humble to who we are and to grow their cultural humility muscle, something that we each have inside of us, to have the ability to recognize that we need to invite people's differences and we need to respect people's perspectives and people's values so that we can learn what is most important to them. But it's also, as we learn this process, it's important that we respect that people have different customs, different ways that they do things, and different ways that they communicate. And that it's important that we recognize that we need to respect other people's ways of communicating as much as we want them to respect the ways that we communicate. Same thing with ethnic customs, traditions. We need to show that same kind of respect. It's also, I think, important to recognize that we have the ability to share some vulnerability with people and offer people an introduction to who we are, what we value, and the belief system that we have, and why we have that belief system, so that they can better understand what's important to us and they can support us in the best way possible. So I wanted to thank you all for allowing me to share space with you and take a moment to pass the baton over to Micah, who is a Link Center Steering Committee member and who is going to take the next piece of this presentation.
Thanks, Regina. And hi, everybody. My name is Micah P. Sorkia. I'm a researcher, I'm an educator, and I'm a self-advocate on the Link Center Steering Committee. And I'm excited to talk to everybody today about what it means for the services that we receive to really be person-centered and what we can expect from them, as well as some ways that it can be applied in our lives and some tools that we can use. I want to start by explaining this word person-centered care a little bit more. This is one of those things I think that we hear a whole lot without anybody ever really taking the time to explain what it means or what they're doing apart from others. People just say, we're doing person-centered care. And we go along with that. We have to, because they've not explained it. But from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, we have this definition. Integrated healthcare services that are delivered in a setting and a manner that is responsive to individuals and their goals, values, and preferences in a system that supports good provider-patient communication and empowers individuals receiving care and providers to make effective care plans together. That's a whole lot of like intense words to explain exactly what someone just put in the chat. Ultimately, it's treating someone with respect and dignity. And it's doing that in a few different ways. It's responding to people instead of just reacting to the assumptions that you have about us, our needs, and our diagnoses when we come in the room. It's taking the time to get to know us as individuals and what goals, values, and preferences that we have. What is our culture like? What culture do we come from? And how do we do things in our community? How do we communicate? And how can providers make more room for our voice? And if they're able to communicate with us and make room for our voices in our care, how can they begin to share some of the power that they have with us so that we can be a part of making our care plans and making the decision about the kind of care that we get? This is a way of providing services that's based in our values, that's rooted in the knowledge that we have to do right by the people who are engaging in these services. And that's something that I think all of us with experience getting these supports can really resonate with, because we haven't always gotten support in that kind of way. I'm going to talk about what does this look like in practice? What are some of the features that we can expect, count on, and advocate for when they're not present in the care that we're getting? Well, like I've said, person-centered care is responsive and proactive, not reactive. It never says, oh, your diagnosis is X, so you get all of these kinds of things, because that's what people with your diagnosis get. It doesn't say, well, here's what your waiver says you can have, so that's all we can do. It makes an effort to put people and our lived experience at the center of the conversation and at the center of every decision that is made. And these decisions should focus on our wellness, not just our disability or presenting needs, but what is going to help us thrive and live well and fulfilling lives in our community, as well as focusing on inclusion and connection. Our voices and our experiences and perspectives should always be included in conversations that concern us and should truly live into the value of nothing about us without us. For this to happen, though, communication is key, and people have to be willing to communicate from the very beginning and ensure that there are open lines of communication between people with IDD, our providers, and our caregivers, that all parties who will be affected in a decision should be there to have a say. And we should be able to work with each other as a team, not as one person who knows everything and the other people down on the bottom who need all the help, but rather that everybody in a room has something to contribute and some important knowledge that can help us solve our problems. This speaks to self-determination and choice. We are living our lives and we have a right to exercise our voice and to have choice in how our lives unfold. And when I talk about choice, I'm talking about true choice. I'm not just talking about, do you want a green apple or do you want a red apple? Alicia in her video talked about how important nutrition is to her. And so a choice like a red or a green apple isn't actually a choice, because either way, you're going to eat an apple. A real choice would be to say something like, do you want to have fruit with your lunch this week? Here's what we have. And if you want something else that we don't have, maybe we can make a plan to go to the store. It's giving people the opportunity to have a say and to have some control, which I think often goes underrated in conversations like this, because we don't talk enough about how navigating these systems, how relying on others for support, especially systems like these, often requires us to give up some control in our lives, control that other people often take for granted. And being able to live your life the way that you want it is directly related to our sense of mental health, to our sense of feeling fulfilled and comfortable in our own lives. Person-centered care is also strengths-based. It's not all about having the right treatment or a perfect management plan. These things can be an important part of helping us to live well, but if we're always only worried about what's wrong, then we can lose direction. Being strength-based helps us have a sense not only of what we want to steer away from, but what we want to go towards and what we want to nurture in our lives. Some models like Charting the Life Course are really good at doing that. And another important thing about being strengths-based is that it also gives us an opportunity to take control of our own story. There are still so many stigmas and misconceptions that exist about disability, and people often misunderstand us. When we have the chance to lead with our strengths, to lead with what we're good at, what other people love and value about us, what we contribute to our communities and enjoy doing, these give us the chance to take control of our story and show the world who we really are, not just some of the things that we're dealing with, because everybody has things that they're dealing with. And it's unfair and ableist that we should be made to only be defined by what we're going through and not all of the other wonderful things that make us human and make us who we are. And most importantly, person-centered care is contextual and ecological. These are some really big words, but what they mean is person-centered care pays attention to all of those things that Stacy and Regina talked to us about in the beginning of our presentation. Person-centered care doesn't confuse seeing the whole person with only looking at the person. It doesn't blame me as a person with disabilities for every single problem or challenge that I run into in life. We live in an imperfect world that often causes stress, causes challenges, and creates barriers in our lives. And some of those exist within us, but many more of those exist out in the world, out in our communities. Barriers like living in a food desert, or not getting to have a say in the shopping and what kind of food gets brought into your home or residential setting. It's easy to blame someone for not eating right. It's a little more challenging to look into all of the factors that affect a person's eating, from the money that we have to buy food, to who helps us plan our grocery lists and meals, or if we even get any help with any of those things at all. But looking at that deep, all of these different aspects and elements of a situation is the only real way to find the answer and to support a person in a holistic way. And ecological understands that all of the things in our lives are interconnected in one way or another. So just as Alicia said, like our food that affects all of our body functions, and like the world, the environment that we live in can affect our ability to get food, we can see these problems aren't isolated and they're not all ours to own just because we have disabilities. And we have to be sensitive to the relationships and to the context that are at play in some of the situations in our lives. And it means practicing cultural and linguistic competence and humility. Understanding that there are many different kinds of people, many different kinds of cultures, and many ways to be in this world. And there's really no right one that's better than all of the others or has all of the answers. So when be able to expect those in our lives to hold space for our way of being, whether it's because of our culture or our disability or the way that we speak, we should be able to count on other people in our lives to make space for us and to trust the input that we have and to make as well as their own expertise. Having the lived experience of living with a disability is different from being a professional in the disability field. It's different from being a parent or a caregiver to people with disabilities. And we have important knowledge to offer about our lives as people with disabilities. If only people can learn to listen. And that is what makes our advocacy so important. To achieve positive health outcomes through a whole person care model, people have to deliver the right care in the right place at the right time. In Victoria's video, she talked about how when she's struggling with her mental health, she doesn't always need more pills or more medication. She doesn't always need more therapy or to go to the hospital. What she really needs in those moments is a human connection and some reassurance. She didn't talk about having everything that she wants under the sun and having it be perfect. She talked about having someone to turn to and to trust. And that's really what care is all about. Sometimes when people tell us that they need care, they're talking about treatment. They're using care as a medical word. But care is one of the things that makes us human. And it's so much bigger and broader than medicine or diagnosis. And care can look so many different ways that aren't just dictated by a diagnosis or by what our waiver says we can get. So Victoria's example is a really clear example of this. That sometimes it's about human connection and reassurance wherever we are. But sometimes care can also look like advocacy. It can look like speaking up when you see a gap in a service or barriers that you're running up to. One of the best pieces of advice that my therapist ever gave me when I was a teenager, and I got bullied a lot, was why she told me this, but she said, if anybody is ever being cruel to you, discriminating against you, treating you differently for who you are, you need to know two things. The first thing you need to know is that it's not actually about you. It's not personal. It's not about who you are. It's something about that person. And secondly, you need to know that you're not the only one that this is happening to. So get out there and find your people. Care can look like that. Can look like helping someone remember who they are, and advocating for them. It can be writing someone's service plan in plain language so that it's easier for us to understand and engage with our plan of care. Care can look like slowing down in a conversation. It can look like explaining what you mean or making more room for people who don't communicate using speech. I'm a part-time AAC user and I have a lot of friends that use different ways to communicate. And I have seen people be so impatient or even downright rude when it takes me a while to type out what I want to say or when I can't find the words immediately. I have seen people ignore my friends who use letterboard because it takes too long, or they have to read, or I've seen people ignore my friend who uses an ASL interpreter because they feel uncomfy talking to an interpreter too, or talking to someone who doesn't talk like they do. So care can look all of these different ways, and it's always an opportunity for us to build a connection, for us to build a deeper understanding of someone. And it can be an opportunity to advocate. I want to talk now about one of the big frameworks that a lot of people in our lives use to assess and provide the kinds of care that we get. It's called the biopsychosocial approach, and I really wish that I'd made a visual to go with it. But it has 3 parts: bio, psycho, and social. The first part, bio, has to do with your body. It's our medical needs, it's our health, it's our nutrition, our sleep, the medications that we're on, things like that. Psycho is kind of what it sounds like. It's our mental health and the factors that are related to it. Things like not just your mental health, but your executive function, how easy it is to focus and understand things, and how we engage with the world based on our understandings and our mental health. But as Alicia pointed out, as well as Stacy and Regina, both of these parts of ourselves, our mental health and our physical health, are connected, and they're at least partly affected by the social circumstances that we're living in. Our communities. Do we have access to transportation and healthy food? Do we have a job to go to or somewhere to spend our time? Do we like what we're doing with our time? Do we want to be doing those things? Social also has to do with things like ableism and discrimination. I'm going to get pretty deep into the social in this section because it's about putting the social back in this framework. But in exploring these social factors, I'm going to talk about a few things that can be pretty hard to hear about. So if talking about some of the discrimination that we experience as people with disabilities might be hard or upsetting for you today, that's okay. You can step away and be gentle with yourself. Do whatever you need to do to be comfortable in this space and get the most out of this presentation. And if you have to tune out for a bit, no worries. But to put the social back in biopsychosocial, we have to get a lot more comfortable with all of the different social factors that do affect people with disabilities and get better at using a social model of disability alongside the medical one. So there's a lot of different ways that we can understand disability in our culture, and most people do so with a really medical lens. They think about disability as something that's related to being sick or being unwell. And unfortunately, that leads a lot of people to make judgments about whether it's good or bad or not. But the social model of disability says that actually there are always going to be people who have different bodies, different minds, and different medical needs. And we can choose to build our communities in ways that support all kinds of people, or we can be in the situation that we are now, which is a community and a society that has been built without considering people with disabilities. And when you don't consider disabilities, you create barriers. You build stairs without building a ramp. I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. And the impact of that is that we often end up missing all of these social factors that are at play in our lives. Something called diagnostic overshadowing happens a lot. And diagnostic overshadowing is that thing that happens when people assume that you had a bad day, not because you didn't get enough sleep or because you would like to have more friends to talk to and you're lonely. No, those couldn't be real stressors that you have. You just had a bad day because you're disabled. It happens to me. I'm autistic, and people will assume that my bad days are because I'm not controlling my behavior well enough, for example. Forgetting that I'm a human and there are lots of things in life that can be hard for anyone. And the reality of being a human is that our social determinants of health and our health related social needs, those are our conditions for wellness. Do we have a safe place to live? Do we get good sleep? Do we have social support to rely on? And when human beings don't have those things that support our wellness, everyone struggles. Anybody in that situation would struggle, and it's not always about disability or difference. So we need to use both those medical and social models together so that we can make sure that we get the medical support that we need, sure, but that we don't stop there, that we don't forget about all the different staircases in people's lives, that we don't forget about all the other challenges that someone can come up against. And unfortunately, an overly medical view of disability has created a situation where there are lots of challenging social experiences that we as people with disabilities, and particularly IDD, have in common, and they can even be traumatic for us. These experiences include isolation and being excluded from our communities or from activities that we'd like to participate in. One really clear example of this is just how many high schools have the special education department, often its own separate wing where everyone's kind of kept away from our peers and don't have as many opportunities to join in with everyone else. It can look like the trouble that many of us have finding a job, or the barriers that we face when we don't have adequate transportation. There are high rates of trauma in the disability community because many aspects of being a person with disabilities come along with mean that we will be left out, we will be misunderstood, we will be misjudged. And many of these misunderstandings create even further barriers to communication and keep us from getting the information that we need about our care and the options and choices that we actually have, and being able to exercise or make those choices for ourselves. Needing support to make choices doesn't mean that we shouldn't have choices or have the opportunity to make choices. We should have supported decision making with people who are in our corner supporting us as we make our choices. And many of these barriers have led to people with disabilities being declared a health disparity group by the World Health Organization. A health disparity means that there is, across our whole community of people with disabilities, we have more health problems and worse health outcomes. And it's not because we're disabled. It's because of all of these things that I'm talking about, of lots of providers ignoring other aspects of our lives or ignoring other needs that we have because they're mistaken and assuming that they're all just about our disability. We have to start to think more about the system itself and the world that we're living in, and all of the stairs and silos that we are asked to navigate unfairly. The system that we live in currently is filled with ableism and paternalism. Ableism is this idea that people without disabilities are better somehow than those of us with disabilities. And it puts value judgments on people based on what we can do or what we can't do or what we need help to do. And it judges needing help as somehow being less than. We know that this is wrong and unfair as well, given that anybody who lives long enough will find themselves losing some abilities over time as well. Paternalism comes right along with these bad ideas of ableism. And lots of ableist people mistakenly think that because they see themselves as better or as knowing more than everyone else, that they get to be the ones to make a decision, that what they say has to go and has to be the right thing. But this isn't always true. There are people in our lives that we should listen to and value their opinions, but they should be willing to walk alongside us and hear our voice out too, and to support us in our care. We have a voice, but others often struggle to hear us or to really listen when they do. I've already talked about how people can ignore people who use AAC, but we have, and this can be really hard, I think, to constantly, Victoria talked about how hard it can be to constantly have to introduce yourself to new providers. That can also be really grating and really difficult to have to work with and constantly engage with somebody who isn't willing to listen to you. But I really liked what Regina said about sharing our culture and being in this moment of vulnerability as a way of giving people more ways to understand and relate to us. We often get some of our attempts at communication misunderstood as behaviors, but we should never ever stop trying to make ourselves heard. Because when our voices aren't heard, we lose opportunities, and everyone deserves the dignity of risk. When I live with other people, but I live independently. And when I first moved out of my mom's house, it was a really, really bad day, the day that I moved out. I had been invited to take in a room with some other friends who also had disabilities. A room was opening up and I was invited. And my mom was really, really, really against it. It was a really emotional day. There was a lot of crying as we were packing and putting things in the car. And as I was putting my last boxes in the car, my mom said, "But what if you end up on the street? I just don't want you to end up on the street." And I looked at her and I thought, dang, like, is there not a safety net for me? I looked at her and I said, well, if that happens, I hope I can come back. And that's really what it means to give people support without putting safety over everything. Like, there's safety from danger, yes. But in that moment, I needed to know also that I was safe to take a risk. I was safe to try something new. And if it didn't work out, there were going to be people to catch me. Spoiler alert, though, it worked out. We have to navigate lots of different silos and lots of different systems that, in my experience, people who don't have to deal with these things get stressed out just hearing about. Some of the ways that our systems of care work, they could be a full-time job. The amount of time that it takes to fill paperwork in, the amount of time it takes to make all our phone calls and make sure that we have the right appointments, the right assessments, the right supports in place for when we'll need them. And this can lead to cycles of exhaustion and burnout. For us, as people who are constantly having to coordinate and negotiate and balance and rebalance the supports in our lives, but we also often find ourselves working with lots of really stressed and burnt out people too. And that can be hard. I've had to learn not to take stuff personally, and to just keep pushing and just keep advocating and to stick to what I know is my truth and my need. It's never my fault when someone is struggling in their job. And I have found that, people can help us get every support and a plan that looks really good on paper, but then accidentally, just like Alicia said, leave us without the supports that we need to really implement that plan in a successful way. And that is a disservice to us. So don't take a provider's burnt outness as personal. Don't take it as being about you. Keep advocating, keep asking, who else can I talk to? Who else can you connect me to? Because when we sort of take no for an answer or just follow their processes to the letter, it can set us up for that inadequacy for feeling like it's our fault when it isn't. And we already deal with a lot of separation and isolation just by having to go through these systems. And I hope that something that we can take away today is that, yes, we will always have to turn to some kind of system like this to get some of our needs met. But just like Victoria and her family and her natural supports, we can also look to the community around us, and we don't have to accept the separation and isolation that the system causes for us as the outcome forever. We don't have to accept, no, there's nothing left in our system, as to mean, well, then I'm just never going to get my need met. There are so many solutions out there and so many ways of solving problems. If you keep advocating and find your people, there's a way. And doing so can help prevent or support us in some of these other isolating experiences that we share. Things like poverty, like not having access to technology, or having a harder time getting out in our community, or accessing opportunities to build skills. Many of us have been tokenized and brought into spaces where we're just there to make other people feel good. When you feel funny about that, you're the one who's right. It is weird. It is wrong. And you do have a right to speak up. I see someone saying yes, especially when they make changes that expect us to adapt when we work best in consistency. Right. The services that we depend on can go through changes, and we're often the last to know and the first that's expected to hurry up and get adapted to it. And that creates a lot of stress. But somewhere in all of this, we have to find a recipe for well-being. We have to find a path toward not only supporting our disabilities and the things that we struggle with, but making sure that we're creating a path for thriving. We're creating a path for connection. And I feel really fortunate to get to work for a mental health provider for people with IDD, where we do almost all of our services from the perspective of positive psychology. And that's where this phrase PERMA comes from. PERMA is part of a bigger theory about well-being that understands that we have to have that all human beings want to live good lives. All human beings have strengths alongside our vulnerabilities or weaknesses, and all human beings need certain things like those social determinants of health, healthy food, good sleep, safe, supportive community, a home. We need that baseline foundation, whether we have a disability or not. That's what we need to live well. And then from that foundation, we can begin to build on our strengths to nurture PERMA, to nurture opportunities in our day for positive emotion, for engagement. Sometimes people think that engagement or community engagement just means you go to the community, you go to Chick-fil-A, you go bowling once a week or something. But it actually means being deeply engaged, being a part of something. It means, okay, maybe your thing is going to Chick-fil-A, but when you get there, the person at the register knows your order, asks how you're doing, and remembers your name. That's engagement. And it supports positive relationships, which we all need and deserve. Everybody deserves a sense of meaning in their life, whether that comes from being a member of a faith community, from volunteering, or from advocating for others, which I saw some people in the chat say is really meaningful and important to them. And we all deserve to have a sense of accomplishment in our day, that sense of getting to the end of the day and thinking, today was a good day. I did what I needed to do. And people without disabilities think that accomplishment means all these big highfalutin things, but it really just means feeling good about what we've done, whether we're finally able to do something a lot, like finally able to drive, whether we're finally able to go to the grocery by ourselves, or whether we just navigated a challenging experience better than we thought. Maybe we remembered to use our coping skills. That's as much of an accomplishment as it is landing a big, great job or something. And when the people who are providing our services know us more than just our disabilities, but they know us as a person who's a member of a family, of a community, of somebody who has strengths, goals, interests, and preferences, who has culture and so on, it becomes so much easier to think and plan for what's going to be meaningful to us, what's going to engage us and lead us to a better quality of life, instead of constantly just focusing on our deficits, on managing risks and keeping us safe. Remember, Victoria's video ended with knowing that she's safe and cared for. And cared for implies connection and wellness, not just safe. So now let's look at a kind of an elephant in the room. Technology has advanced so fast, and it's become this constant kind of factor in life that we didn't have to account for before. And it also connects deeply to our social determinants of health. If we're impoverished, we might have less access to technology. If we live in a rural area, technology might help us get to more services where transportation is scarce. Using apps to support us throughout the day can help us navigate a workforce shortage. And there's so many resources that are short right now. Transportation, CLF funding, these things are often way too limited when we know that our needs aren't limited. And so technology continues to advance in a lot of different ways that can help us get better services and can help fill some of these gaps while we wait for policy, while we wait for the community to finally catch up. And a couple of these tools are telehealth and apps. But remember, these tools are just tools. They're a means to an end. They're not a replacement for a lot of the things that we need. And that's why we've been, and to use either of these tools, we really have to make sure that we're doing it in a person-centered way, and that we are being sensitive to the circumstances around it, because the technology is only as good as the support that is there for us to use it. And this is why we've been grounding and what it means to be person-centered and why that's so important. So let's talk about telehealth. It's a way of getting services through the computer or the phone, but it's kind of like taking a trip. You can take a trip in a car, a bus, a train, but the trip is actually where you go. It's not how you get there. Telehealth is the same way. It's not the computer. It's the thing you're doing on the computer. And there are a lot of different factors that we have to think about to make sure that it's going to be a supportive choice for people with disabilities. Because just like a lot of other things that I've talked about, a lot of our technology was designed without people with disabilities in mind. So there's a lot of things that we have to consider to make sure that therapy, for example, is still effective for people when it's given through telehealth. And crisis situations are a really good example of this. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Professionals should support us and our caregivers in getting access to technology. That means not making sure that we can access the device, that we have the accommodations we need to use it, but also having any funding that we might need to get that technology and helping us learn how to use it. like troubleshooting on the fly. This can help us to prevent some of these really negative experiences that lead people to not want to use technology. And we should also acknowledge that certain parts of our services still need an in-person touch. It's not a replacement for human connection, and crisis situations are like a prime example. Telehealth can be supportive in a lot of situations, but there's no replacement for human connection. I'm part of a research team who has been working hard to learn about how we can make telehealth better and more effective for people with IDD. And we created this video to share what we learned. It talks about several important things that people with disabilities can do to get ready for telehealth and what we can count on our providers to do as well. The other technology that I want to talk about is apps. These are everywhere right now, and there's the whole like Apple thing of like there's an app for that, right? There's so many different choices and so many different apps out there that we need a way to quickly tell when an app is actually going to be a helpful support in a situation and to help us choose wisely. Accessibility is the most important factor, and any app that we try to use should be grounded in person-centered planning, understanding that it's going to make sense in the person's situation, and it's going to be easy and not frustrating or challenging to use. And apps are another thing that can complement other person-based supports, but they're generally not a replacement. I use almost all of the apps that you see on the screen in front of you, but I use pretty much, I use support for most of them. I use most of them. So for Goblin Tools, for example, this is an app that it doesn't have anything to do with health or mental health. It's all about tasks. It helps in household chores. It helps me, I can type in any chore that I need to do and it will break it down into all the steps to make that happen so that I can do stuff like clean my kitchen or clean my bathroom without needing a ton of support. But I still need reminders to open up the app or to type in what I need to do sometimes. AAC Bestie is a really great AAC app that I recommend for folks who maybe don't have access to speech or who can't afford things like Proloquo to go. And Black Dog Institute created Healthy Mind, which is one of the only mental health apps that I've seen that is plain language and specifically for people with disabilities. It's from Australia and you have to use it on your computer, but I do highly recommend it. I'm also gonna, and thank you for your attention today, for listening. I'm gonna pass it over to Stacy for a quick few more notes on technology.
Thanks so much, Micah. And I think you all can tell Micah gave us a lot to think about, right? So we want to hear from you. I'm going to skip over wrapping up the technology, but I think it's such a great strategy, and Micah did such a great job in explaining, what technology can do for you all. But I'm going to pass it on to Rebecca and Max, partners in the Link Center, and they're going to walk you through the group exercise. This is where we're going to hear from you all about your thoughts on whole person supports and the things that you've heard today. So Max and Becky, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So what we Sorry about that. So welcome, thank you very much. So what we're gonna do is we are gonna go through an exercise. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read through a situation of a self-advocate. And after I read through the situation, your job will be to come up with some things that you could advocate for if you were in this individual's shoes, or in other words, if you were this individual. So listen carefully, and then I will have you all come up with some ideas in the chat. And if you would like, feel free to just request to unmute, and someone will unmute you if you are comfortable with saying what it is you come up with just verbally or out loud. So here we go. Chet lives with his parents. He was just let go from his job at the hardware store because he missed a lot of shifts due to his anxiety. Chet sometimes has trouble leaving the house, especially when his parents are not home to help him get off the bad thoughts he has. He says he feels better when he gets a good night's sleep, but they live in the city and it can be very loud at night. Chet's parents have been looking for work because their company shut down and they have no income. They also lost their health insurance. Chet really wants a girlfriend and to live in his own place one day, but doesn't feel like that will ever happen. So if you were Chet, what are some things that you could advocate for yourself that may help you feel more supported emotionally, mentally, and physically?
Please feel free to add your comments in the chat. You can raise your hand and come off mute, whatever you'd like. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
I see Josie has her hand up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that if I was Ted and I had lost my job because of my anxiety, also because and I let go of my job, I think I would advocate to find something that I'm interested in, passionate about, that doesn't judge me for my disability. And I will advocate to be able to work just like anyone else, because it's how we live in life and we get out of poverty. And he could also help his family if he was working. And I think also that when they lost their health insurance, they can still advocate and try again to apply, maybe go to legislators and tell his personal story. Just some ideas.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Really good ideas. Now we also have some in the chat. I see Max.
Yep. So I got one that says contact organizations like NAMI, SSI, Easter Seals, etc. for more support. One says tools to help with blocking out the noise like fans, earplugs, etc. to help sleep better at night. Another comment in the chat I see is I could advocate for earplugs or a sound machine to help me sleep better at night. Another comment I see is I would advocate for a solution to the noise to help get better sleep, maybe some sort of gray noise machine or a technology that can support that part. Tackle the challenge one step at a time, starting with the sleep.
Many comments focused on the sleep as a starting point.
Oh, another one is advocates to help to speak up for himself and prepare and support him to find a job that understands his disabilities. And then another one I got here is advocate to find a job to work from home.
Mm. That's a great idea. I also love the idea about using technology. That's so important and relates to some of what we discussed today.
Got another one. It says, once Chet is getting some better sleep and has more supportive foundation, maybe advocating for job supports. Someone should ask Chet or look into the factors that were contributing to his anxiety about work.
Great
And
point.
then another one is customized employment.
I like thinking about this step by step. Okay, well, I think to wrap up, we'll turn it over to Jean. Thank you so much, Max. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, there's still more coming in. Is that, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry about that.
Yeah, you're gonna probably have delay. One says financial resources for the whole family. Another one says also making sure that there's some fun and not just stress in Chet's day. And then another one says healthy relationship for finding a girlfriend, training series. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Becky and Max, for the great exercise. And of course, as always, to all of you. Remember, please put in the chat any of your go-to resources and anything that you think will contribute to this wonderful dialogue. Everybody needs to know as much as we can about getting information about all of us as whole people. So anything that you contribute will be super, super appreciated. And also, just kind of note our past and future shared learning groups. Note the schedule, because as you know from these sessions now, they're remarkably meaningful and such great resources to be able to access after the fact. And you can get all of the, the recordings and the tools and everything from this site. So be sure to check those out. And keep in mind, you can always visit the Link Center to get additional information and to retrieve some of the things we've covered. You can always do that. And again, a huge shout out to everyone involved today. Oh, wait, before I thank everybody, be sure to complete your evaluation. That is awfully important. We take your evaluations very seriously, and your feedback helps us get better at what we do. So please, before you completely sign out today, please complete that survey. And also the address and link. You just saw the address and link, and it was also included in the chat, and you'll be getting an email in case you don't have time to complete it right now. So thank you. And a huge thanks, of course, to Alicia, Victoria, Micah, our awesome facilitator team who does amazing work behind the scenes and during our time together, the ACL, and all of our partners. We're just so grateful for all of you taking your time and being with us and contributing. And we're so grateful for all of you. So be sure to take the survey. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next time.